Is weird, odd, strange, or just plain bizarre is really your cup of tea? Then, the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast will give you that fix. Can't believe it? Well, listen for yourself as we deliver the strangest news you definitely won't find on CNN or Fox. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Weird News, the GSMC Weird News Podcast. Brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network, of course. I'm your host, Emily Ferrier, here to bring you through my favorite weird news stories of the past few days. Starting us off this week, a Utah woman who faced charges for being topless in her own home in front of her stepchildren has taken a plea bargain. Yeah, you heard that right. A woman charged with being topless in her own home. Taking a plea bargain. Stakes were too high for Tilly Buchanan to take the criminal case to trial. Her attorney, Randy Richards, said this Tuesday. She initially was charged with 3 counts of Class A misdemeanor. Lewdness involving a child, accused of exposing her breasts to her stepchildren several years ago. The charge is especially weighty consequences because if convicted, you would be required to be on the sex offender registry for 10 years. Richard said that he advised his client to take the deal. She would have loved to take it upon appeal. But she was pretty much at my advice that she's not because I don't think she would win, but because there's a possibility that if we go all the way to trial, she'd be convicted by a jury and then she'd be on the sex offender registry. Buchanan instead resolved her case Tuesday by admitting to one charge of Class B misdemeanor lewdness. She did not admit in plea agreement and documents to any other crimes involving the children. But she did say that she exposed her breasts, which caused affront or alarm in the children. The plea itself will be held in abeyance, meaning the charge will be dismissed after a year if Buchanan does not commit any new crimes and pays $600. So, I think it's probably safe to say that that's not going to be happening, so she'll be fine. Richards called the ending of the case ludicrous, noting that his client pleaded guilty to essentially being topless in front of her husband. He promised that Buchanan would bring a civil lawsuit against West Valley City. This whole thing is ridiculous, he said. She or other women have to worry about their kids seeing them topless? It's ridiculous. The West Valley City prosecutors defended the criminal charges. This case has never been about nudity in one's own home. Instead, it's about the responsibility we have towards others. West Valley City Attorney Ryan Robinson said, adding that the case was resolved when Mrs. Buchanan took responsibility for her actions. Her actions, I will remind you, being topless in her own home. So she was taking responsibility for being topless in her own home. I think you can tell how I feel about this. Buchanan's plea ends a case that drew national attention, comes at the heels of judge's decision last month to uphold Utah's lewdness law. Say that 5 times fast. Buchanan's legal team had asked 3rd District Judge Kara Pettit to find Utah's lewdness statute unconstitutional, arguing that it discriminates against women by making it illegal for them to show their breasts, while it's not illegal for a man to be topless. Buchanan's attorneys leaned on a recent 10th Circuit Court ruling which sided with 2 Colorado women who sued the city in Fort Collins. The women are part of Free the Nipple Fort Collins, a group arguing that the city's ban on female toplessness violated their right to equal protection. But Petit ruled that the ordinance in Colorado and Utah's lewdness statute was significantly different. In Fort Collins, the ordinance outlawed a woman from showing her breasts in public. It did not include language indicating that the exposure was unlawful for men and did not require any specific intent or mental state. The portion of the law that Buchanan is charged under is much different, Petit ruled. It prohibits lewd behavior by both women and men in front of children. It also requires prosecutors to show that the defendant exposed themselves and knew their actions would either cause affront or alarm, or the children with intent to arouse or gratify their sexual desires of either party. The American Civil Liberties Union of Utah, who joined Buchanan's case last November, said Tuesday that its lawyers are consulting with Buchanan and her attorneys about pursuing a civil case that would overturn the lewdness statute that she was originally charged under. Buchanan told the Salt Lake Tribune in September that she had been installing insulation with her husband in their garage the day of the incident. The couple had removed their clothes just inside their home to get the itchy materials off their skin, and she was topless when her stepchildren came downstairs and saw them. She said her stepchildren seemed embarrassed, but Buchanan told them that they shouldn't treat her differently because she's a woman. She told them a woman's chest wasn't inherently sexual, and if they were comfortable seeing their dad's chest, it shouldn't be different for her. But the West Valley City prosecutor said the situation wasn't quite that innocent. They accused Buchanan of stripping down in front of her stepchildren to make a statement about how her husband could take off his shirt, then a woman should as well. I think if a woman has to take her top off because it's covered in insulation that was causing her skin to be itchy, and she's doing that in her own home, why should that be a problem? And why do we need to say that it's a statement? That's a pretty terrible and disgusting thing that they did, but here we go. They further allege that Buchanan, while under the influence of alcohol, told her husband that she would only put her shirt back on if he showed her his penis. The police became involved in the situation after the Division of Child and Family Services began an investigation involving the children. It was unrelated to Buchanan. So I think if it was unrelated to Buchanan, I think we know that she was probably not the party at fault here. Though it was not the focus of the initial investigation, prosecutors say in court papers the children's mother reported the incident to authorities. So this sounds like probably the case was an issue between the ex-wife, or the mother of the children, and the father. And instead of getting herself in trouble, she threw the other woman under the bus, or the other way around. The man was getting in trouble, threw the woman under the bus. Either way, it does not sound like Buchanan was at fault here. It's an absolutely ridiculous thing to charge a woman being topless in her own home. And I stand with this woman, and I sincerely hope that she figures that out. But what a ridiculous thing to happen, to be charged with. Of course, we know from various backgrounds on this show that she's not the first person to be charged with a ridiculous thing, and she won't be the last. When we come back, burglars get interrupted by an odd occurrence. When we come back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back. So when we left off, we were talking about a woman getting charged with lewdness for, being topless in her own home. Ridiculous stuff. Even more ridiculous, 2 burglars who were armed with bolt cutters stopped to feed and pet a llama. Oh my goodness, not a llama. That's not a thing. A llama at a farm park before carrying on with their raid. The pair of thieves were caught on camera giving carrots to the family favorite Larry the Llama at the Raglan attraction in Monmouthshire. Raglan Family Park owner Gareth Williams said the men later made off with some power tools. Police have appeals for information. So they did actually get away with it. But just for comparison, we're going to talk about some of the weirdest and most ridiculous crimes that did actually get arrested for. First one being the Barefoot Bandit. In 2010, a teenager named Colton Harris Moore taught himself how to fly a plane using a simulation program. But he never had a proper pilot's license. He was able to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of planes, cars, and boats, and he did so all while barefoot. Since the police usually find people based on their sneaker impressions, they never keep a good record of toe prints, Moore knew that as long as he took his shoes off, he could get away with stealing these vehicles. He earned the nickname Barefoot Bandit and continued to repeat the process over and over again. Moore was finally caught and sent to prison in 2010 when he was 19, completed his full sentencing, and was released on probation in 2016. The story of the Barefoot Bandit became a sort of folk legend. During an interview, Moore said he regrets what he did, especially because he only began his life as an adult in the real world in his 20s, and he said, I've either been in the woods or on the run or both. His story is so interesting that 20th Century Fox paid $1.4 million to purchase the rights to make a movie. Unfortunately, though, the money had to go back to the restitution to pay back the victims of his crimes. During the Great Depression, people were struggling to make poverty. Someone decided to make a counterfeit $1 bill and began using them all over New York City. Normally, counterfeiters never bother to make 1s or 5s because it seems far too much effort for so little money. These bills were poorly made, so poorly made that the Washington was misspelled, and yet they were being accepted and circulated all over the city. The Secret Service began tracking these fake dollar bills, and they were discovered that the mysterious criminal made about $5,000 over the course of 10 years, from 1938 to 1948, when the inflation that's more like $90,000 today. One of the reasons why it's so difficult to find this man is because he never spent more than a few fake dollars a week, and he never used counterfeit bills in the same store twice. The con artist was called Mr. 880 because of his case number. 1948, Mr. 880 was finally discovered to be a man named Emmerich Jutner, alias Edward Mueller. He was an old man in his 70s living in a small apartment Schuttner was getting a free rent by working his apartment building as the superintendent, but he didn't have much income. He used fake money to buy essentials like food, and since he's otherwise a law-abiding citizen, he only served 4 months in jail. Became a legend, and the story inspired a film in 1950. Like a scene out of a movie, a group of 3 masked men descended from the ceiling of the Kafka's de Westen's apartment in Berlin, Germany. Security cameras watched them steal $6.8 million worth of jewelry before climbing the ropes and disappearing into the night. It was almost a perfect crime, except for one tiny mistake. One of the thieves dropped a rubber glove that they'd been wearing. Police were able to take a single drop of sweat and find the DNA. The only trouble was that it belonged to 2 people. Identical twins named Hassan and Abbas. Even though they could narrow down the identity of the twins, there was no way to prove which one actually committed the crime. Because of this, they were both able to walk away without serving any jail time. However, it's not like they're completely away with it. They're both being closely monitored by law enforcement the rest of their lives. So that's a nice one where they did get away. Kind of crazy stuff. For 19 years, the town of King County, Washington, was plagued by the mysterious Green River Killer. He raped and murdered women between 1980 and 2001. It didn't stop until his DNA was linked to 48 different murders. Authorities arrested Gary Ridgway, but for the people that knew him, he was the last of the men you suspect for a serial killer. He was a Vietnam veteran who painted trucks for a car factory in his free time, and he was active in the local church community and evangelized the Bible to his neighbors. He was so good at pretending to be a nice guy, he was practically Ned Flanders. No one would ever suspect that he was living a double life, even though Ridgway was being tried in court for 48 cases of murder, and he confessed to killing 75 women. Amazingly, he wasn't exactly sure how many. He'd lost count. Sometimes all it takes for someone to be a master con artist is to find the victim gullible enough to believe in its fantasy. In 1995, a man named Fategua Barbani Sisco from West African country in Mali went to a Dubai Islamic bank for a car loan. He spoke with the bank manager, Mohammed Ayoub Sisco, who was charming. And after taking some time, he invited the manager over for dinner. When Sisco and Ayoub were alone, he claimed that he was actually a wizard who had magical powers. He took a pile of money and a magical poof of smoke. He performed a stage magic trick to make the money double before the man's eyes. It was enough to convince the bank manager to give Sisco $100 million because he believed that he could double the money. But the story gets even crazier. He flew to New York City, went to Citibank, met a female bank teller, convinced her to become part of the plan, and once she was on his side, she legally married him in order to help him open up an American bank account where he transferred $100 million to the U.S., gave her $50,000 as a thank you, and he became living as a king. He bought helicopters, fast cars, and illegally married dozens of women. He also gave millions to charity. Every time he was arrested for something, he simply paid the bail. And he eventually was deported back to Mali. He was treated like a hero. He was convicted of fraud and sentenced to 3 years in jail, but he got out of his sentence by being voted in as a member of parliament. In Mali, even members of the government are not required to serve jail time, and even though he was caught, everyone knows he was guilty. He's never actually served time for his crimes. And finally, in younger years, a man named Israel Keys had been arrested for raping a young girl, but had barely spent any time in prison. Like many others who were set free, he went on a comment more than violence. He became a serial killer who had spent years planning to kill his victims before he ever acted on it. When he was finally ready to commit the crimes, he paid for everything for cash. He basically did everything right to avoid capture. This multi-year spree came to an end when he was caught in possession of one of his victims' debit cards as a memento of anything. In 2012, he was interrogated in Anchorage, Alaska, where he admitted to dozens of murders, arson, burglary, and he casually spoke about his crimes as if it was a hobby, saying, the things I've done, I don't feel bad about them. This is entertaining for me. In the end, he didn't want to wait out his sentence and ended up committing suicide in jail. Crazy, crazy stuff in this world. When we come back, fake news puts out some fake news. Fake news combatant. Sorry. We'll come back.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back. For those of you that love an ironic story like I do, what's happened here is just kiss, kiss, blow, blow. Ironic. I absolutely loved this. A government initiative that set out to combat fake news in the media was forced to remove one of its entries on Tuesday after falsifying a report by Kiosud website as hoax news. An anti-fake news center earlier today said Kiosud Online made a false claim in its report that the Thai embassy in London said Thai nationals who traveled in the United Kingdom may be quarantined for up to 14 days if they show symptoms of the coronavirus infection. In fact, the statement was taken from a Facebook page run by the Thai embassy in London. The statement said that those who had a fever, coughing, respiratory difficulties, etc., may be held for a medical checkup. It also urged Thai nationals to avoid unnecessary travels to the United Kingdom while the virus outbreak is ongoing, but on its website, the Anti-Fake News Center branded Kiosud reporter false and said such measures are actually not in place. Kiosud is part of a Machicon publishing group, the same company that owns Kiosud English. When reached for comment, an official at the Anti-Fake News Center, which operated by the Ministry of Digital Economy and Society, said the Thai embassy's Facebook page is a fake one. An official one at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs confirmed that the page is indeed run by its London mission. The center later removed the entry without any explanation. The center did not make any attempt to reach out to Kiosud editorial team before running the report as false. The state-sponsored fact-checkers were part of the Ministry of Digital Economy's effort to counter misinformation on social media. But critics raised concerns that the center could be weaponized against legitimate news coverage and deemed unfavorable by the government. That is just the most ironic thing that I can imagine happening in today's news cycle. However, I found some more fantastically ironic stories for you. A father and his two daughters were out walking their dog named Lucky when it struck gold. The dog found gold. Strange coincidences happen no matter where you turn, but when something happens, the total opposite of one expected, it's what we call ironic. Like when a fire station catches on fire, a cop gets arrested. A skydiver develops a fear of heights, but this one is mind-blowing. One of the girls kicked a gold nugget. Her dad weighed the nugget at the supermarket and discovered it was 20 ounces. So $25,000 US. So Lucky did really bring the luck. When you win an award for being a spelling bee champ, you kind of expect the plaque to be error-free. But in 2011, Kevin Bailey and James Deliskev received a spelling bee trophy with an extra mistake. The word spelling had an extra I. So the trophy company should probably hire its past winners to spell check it. This fire hydrant was patented by a guy named Friedrich Graf around 1801. The ironic thing is that there's no way to be sure because the U.S. Patent Office had burned down in 1836. But hey, fire hydrant managed to outlive the Patent Office. You'd expect students enrolled in an ethics class to have some ethics, but you'd be wrong. Dartmouth College students had some serious explaining to do after they got caught cheating. Some students got disciplined, while others had time to ponder their mistakes after getting suspended. Cheating in an ethics class is the most ironically stupid thing that you can do in school. Moviegoers were seriously disappointed after a screening of the movie Noah were canceled. If you don't know, the story of Noah is a massive flood in which he has to get a ship together with two of each species. But right before the screening of this epic, excess water was found in the Exeter View Cinema, so the flood ruined Noah. Most people assume you can eat as much as you want at an all-you-can-eat restaurant, but you can't. George Dalmond and Andy Miles thought they could eat as much as they want when they sat down at the Gobi restaurant in Brighton, but it became their last meal after the manager banned the guys from returning for eating too much food. Homeopathy offers an alternative to standard medical practices, using natural substances to heal the body. But when homeopathy company Terra Medicina discovered some of their product might have contained legit antibiotics, they had no choice but to recall their products to avoid having a potential medical emergency. And another one, when an anti-piracy group vows to end pirated software, you don't expect them to break their own rules. NoPiracy.org got called out for using someone else's copyrighted protected photo for their anti-piracy ad, which is kind of the most perfect example of do as we say and not as we do. A tobacco plant has been key to fighting cancer. La Trobe University research has revealed the tobacco plant's natural defense mechanisms could actually be harnessed to kill cancer cells in the human body. We oppose Conchetta Wurst and all bearded men in dresses. Say bearded men in dresses. A warehouse worker packing stress balls punched his boss in the face. A leader of an anti-Semite party in Hungary finds out he's Jewish. Maybe don't hate. You know? Could be hating yourself. Kansas man with the murderer tattooed on his neck wants to hide ink before murder trial. Should have thought of that before you got murderer tattooed on your neck. Trying to get a tattoo artist to cover it up. And finally, a man buys a penis enlarger and gets a magnifying glass instead. If you purchase the device online, always look out for trolls is the moral of the story. Hilarious response from the trolls. When we come back, talking about artificial intelligence. One of my favorite topics to talk about. So get ready for that when we come back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and one championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back. We talked about some irony, and now something that is ironic. We'll talk about why it's ironic later. Maybe I'll forget. We'll see. The military has its eye on artificial intelligence solutions to everything from data analysis to surveillance, maintenance, and medical care. But before the Defense Department moves full steam ahead in the AI future, they're laying out some ethical problems or principles to live by. Good. Defense Secretary Mark Esper signed off on 5 guidelines in a memo released on Monday. The United States, together with our allies and partners, must accelerate the adoption of AI and lead its national security applications to maintain our strategic position, prevail on future battlefields, and safeguard the rule-based international order, said Esper. AI technology will change much about the battlefield in the future, but nothing will change America's steadfast commitment to be responsible and lawful. The list included a result of a 15-month study by the Defense Innovation Board, which is made up of academics and executives in tech and business who presented their proposed principles in a public forum at Georgetown University in October. According to Esper's Monday memo, the Pentagon pledges in AI efforts will be A, responsible, B, equitable, C, traceable, D, reliable, and E, governable. In short, any technology development and operation should be careful, developed, and used. Have safeguards against bias in data analysis, be auditable to find the source mistakes and correct them, and have narrowly defined perimeters to use and have backup plans for shutdown in case, dun dun dun, things go wrong. That is the scariest sentence that you could have said. We owe it to the American people and our men and women in uniform to adopt AI principles that reflect our nation's values of free and open society. Lieutenant Jack Sheenan, head of the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, told reporters on Monday. This runs in stark contrast to Russia and China, who use AI tech for military purposes, raises serious concern about human rights, ethics, and cultural norms. International norms, China, for example, has used facial recognition and AI technology to survey its citizens' public activity. Guys, why are we doing AI? We're making things with the intellectual capability of humans, but none of the empathy. What is that? Say with me at home, kids. A sociopath. I'm just saying. AI scares the crap out of me. But, hey, guys, let's hear some of some other AI mishaps, if you don't trust me, that I think they're crazy. Number one, a simulated robot was supposed to evolve to travel as quickly as possible, but rather than evolve legs, it simply assembled itself into a tall tower, then fell over. Some of these robots even learned to turn their falling motion into a somersault to add extra distance. You know, evolution isn't easy. They're doing their best. Another set of simulated robots were supposed to evolve into a form that could jump, but the programmer had originally defined jumping as height and the height of the tallest block. So once again, what do we think happened? The robots evolved to be very tall. Programmer tried to solve this by defining jumping as height and the height of the block. Originally the lowest. In response, the robot developed a long, skinny leg that could kick guy in the air as a sort of robot can-can. It actually sounds adorable. I would kind of like that. There was an algorithm that was supposed to sort a list of numbers, and instead it learned to delete the list so that it was no longer technically unsorted. Well done. You know? They're learning to be lazy like us. Good. I'll have a friend. In one simulation, robots learned that small rounding errors in the math that calculated forces meant that they got a tiny bit of extra energy with motion. They learned to twitch rapidly, generating lots of free energy that they could harness. I love these robots. They're so sassy. I take everything bad I said back. This is adorable and hilarious, obviously. Once a group of programmers built algorithms that could play tic-tac-toe remotely against one another on an infinitely large board. One programmer, rather than designing the algorithm strategy, let it evolve its own approach. Surprisingly, the algorithm suddenly began winning all its games. It turned out that the algorithm strategy was to place its move very, very far away. So when its opponent's computer tried to simulate the new greatly expanded board, one huge game board would cause it to run out of memory and crash, forfeiting the game. More cheating. They're so sassy. I love it. Computer game playing algorithms are really good at discovering the kind of matrix glitches that humans learn to exploit for speedrunning. An algorithm playing an old Atari game, Qbert, discovered a previously unknown bug where it could perform very specific series of moves to end one level instead of moving up to the next level, and all the platforms would begin blinking rapidly, and the player would start accumulating huge numbers of points. This one's a little creepier. All right, so buckle in because this is the last one, so obviously it's going to be the weirdest. This example, creepy stuff. This was an algorithm that was supposed to figure out how to apply minimal force to a plane landing on an aircraft carrier. Instead, it discovered that if it applied huge force, it would overflow the program's memory and would register it instead as a small force. The pilot would die, but it would get a perfect score. See, that's where it becomes weird. It's like, oh, they're really funny, they're sassy, they're cheating, they're doing things to like be a little bit lazier and get things around, cheat a little bit and whatever. However, that is how we have our downfall. So, you know, that's where the scary stuff comes in. Be aware of the robots. Anyway, when we come back, a insane medical wonder story coming out of Miami. By medical wonder, I mean hospitals being weird with their treating. So that's when we return from our break.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
All right, welcome back. Hope you guys had a good break. We were talking about robots, and now I'm a little bit horrified. And now we go to Miami, Florida, where a Miami woman counted herself lucky after doctors told her she'd suffered a graze wound in a shooting. Only later, she discovered she'd been walking around with a bullet lodged in her head. Shakina Jefferson, 42, and her wife Janet Medley were heading to a grocery store when bullets started to fly outside their home. Suffering a head wound, Jefferson was taken to the hospital, and she claims that the doctor applied some bandaids and sent her home with antibiotics. 3 days later, her wife took her to a different hospital when she continued to complain about the pain. I'll bloody say so. Shot in the face, given a bandaid, rub some dirt in it, get back on your high horse. Like, what? Guys, I'm no doctor. I don't claim to be. But I'm pretty sure a Band-Aid that's literally, she put a bullet, that's putting a Band-Aid over a bullet hole. Do we all hear? That's an idiom we all know, right? That's crazy. Is that not the craziest thing you've ever heard? Yes? If it's not, here's some more crazy ER story. These are actually not at the fault of the doctors, though. These are weird patient things. As an ER doctor, we see a lot all the time. There's no single shift. Sorry, I lost my place. I work where I'm not asking myself, how in the world did they do that? This day was no different when a male patient walked in with his wife and said, it's stuck. And the nurse asked him, what's stuck, sir? And I said, I put a candle in my butthole and I can't get it out. Candle in the wind, if you will. All sorts of things were running through our minds. We were hoping the candle was the votive kind, not one of the ones with glass containers, but we all knew the first thing we had to do was take a look at his bottom and get an x-ray, because most x-rays will reveal foreign bodies, but there was nothing I could see by just examining. Sure enough, the x-ray showed it was a round candle. You guessed it, still in the glass container. It was one of those 3 to 4 inch round candles that most convenience stores sell. Patient had it stuck so far up he had no way to retrieve it. He felt stupid and embarrassed. Ultimately, he had to go into surgery immediately. The surgeon could dilate his rectum and get the candle out. It was painful for the patient. I had to ask him before discharge, did you light the candle before sticking it up? Or no, he just laughed and tried to console himself through the pain. Moral of the story, don't put anything into your body that you can't retrieve back easily. Amen. Thankfully, a patient had a sense of humor when things go wrong on a day when fishing. His fish hook didn't grab any fish in Lake Michigan, but instead decided to grab a piece of his scalp. Came to the ER with a big fish hook lodged on the right side of his head. As an ER doctor, the first thing I think of was how the scalp can bleed very easily, profusely, and thankfully, the hook was controlling the bleeding where it was stuck. But once I removed it, I needed to prepare for the amount of blood. The difficulty with fish hooks is their rigid shape. I have a circular curve with a barb and a gap which causes them to do real damage in what should be fish, not humans. Fishers rip them off after they capture the fish, but there's no way I could just rip it off his scalp. Coaching the patient through the process so he could relax, I numbed the area and created a wide incision, rotate and wiggle it out. But because I used a little epinephrine, I was able to minimize the amount of bleeding after removal. Then I prepared the wound with sutures, but then the foreign body stuck anywhere in your body, it's important to leave it stuck until you seek medical attention. Removing it without assistance could cause further damage. You know? So, be aware of that. Don't pull it out. I'm sure you've heard that before, but, don't pull it out. Seriously, do a lot of damage. Never trust a plastic surgeon from a hardware store. In 2009, there was a patient presented to the emergency room in Rhode Island. She had some form of hydrogel injected in a large volume, approximately 2 liters, which is actually a very large quantity, 1 in each buttock. By hydrogel, she meant some sort of silicone-based product, like silicone bathroom caulking. The patient said that she was injected by someone in Miami who claims to be a nurse who performed the procedure in their home. When she came to the ER, she had a high fever and was draining pus on both buttocks, which were red, swollen, painful, and infected. We took her to the operating room because the external substance was so integrated in the tissue and around the fat cells. We had to make multiple large incisions on both buttocks. And after that, her buttocks looked as if she'd been attacked by a bear. The only way to get rid of the infection was to remove the external substance. Left the incisions open, packed them with gauze. She was on IV antibiotics for nearly a week, and had to change it in the hospital before leaving against medical advice and disappearing. She ultimately went on the Tyra Banks talk show. A daring young man who was high on meth decided to plan his great escape from the ER. He was to climb into the drop ceiling, making his way out of his room till he fell through the ceiling. He landed on the floor, the foot of a stretcher, and ended up breaking his arm. A young man was experiencing constipation. When he decided he needed a plunger, he grabbed the toilet bowl brush and used it to insert it into his rectum. The plastic hand was curved, got snagged on his anus, and he was unable to remove it without horrific pain. EMS was called. He was transported to the ER with a bushy tail feather dangling from his butt. With the help of his new wife comforting him on one side of the stretcher, the doctor worked to disimpact the toilet brush from his rectum. It's not how plungers work. And finally, I had a patient once who had a 1-liter bottle of vodka inserted into his rectum when he was under the influence. We had to put him on laxatives and used a type of enema to lubricate the area to avoid pain. He was in so much pain when he arrived that he was actually unable to walk. We thought surgery might be required, but he was unable to pass the bottle through his own, forcing. I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of those stories had something in common. And look, I don't want to tell you guys what to do. I don't. But don't put things in your butt. Okay? It's dumb. You're going to get hurt. You're going to need to go to the bathroom. So, go to the bathroom. Go to the hospital, is what I meant. Stop putting things in your butt. Okay? All right, that's it for our medical marvels. And when we come back, you guessed it, my favorite shower thoughts. Yeah, that's right. It's shower thoughts when we return from our break. So get ready.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Hello. Welcome. Welcome. We're back. We're break. I hope you guys are thinking about the stupid things to not put in your butts. I can't stress that enough, guys. I once had, I still have it. He's still kicking and still a doctor. I have a friend that's a doctor, and in his residency, he had to do 2 weeks or 3 weeks on rectal removal. That's how common this is. Stop putting stuff in your butts. Okay? It's going to get lost up there. So now we're going to go to shower thoughts. One of my favorite things, one of my favorite subreddits. Just because, wow, doesn't it make you think? So let's dive right in. That 70s show came out in 1998 and focused on events from 1976, which is 22 years from its release. If the modern version were made, it would be called That 90s Show, and it would follow the exact year the first show came out in 1998. Whoa. That's crazy stuff. In a couple of years, it's going to be That 2000s Show, and that makes me sick. Refined sugar is one of the most addictive and dangerous drugs in history. And yet, mama like. The most popular chair for mobile gaming is a toilet. Gross. That's gross, guys. Think about that. Disneyland in Los Angeles and Disneyland, LA Land is in Los Angeles, and Disney World, OR, is in Orlando. They thought about this, right? Someone on that team's copywriting was on it. Things become old and useless until they become old enough to be ancient and priceless. There is probably a Jake who works at State Farm who has to hear nonstop jokes from customers and wants to die. Oh, poor Jake. Poor Jake. Being able to drink fresh, clean water out of virtually any tap has to be one of the modern world's greatest luxuries. It's true. That's not really a funny one. We need to be more thankful for what we have. Oh yeah, dogs must be bilingual, right? Because they understand the human commands, but also speak bark. Human beings are so social. So social that even if they're alone, they talk to themselves. Yeah, we do. I do. I'll admit it. Anybody else? Please admit it. Am I alone in this? I'm talking to myself right now. Is anyone listening? Candles are how we keep fires as pets. That's the cutest thing I've ever heard. How precious is that? If humans grow hair twice as fast, more people would have short hair. Technically, everything, trash, cars, buildings, plastics, chemicals on this planet have always been here. It's just changed forms one way or the other. Marijuana is a gateway drug to thinking you can rap. That's good. When people steal cars in a movie, the mirrors and seats are always set perfectly for the thief. Yeah, they never have to change. Well, I guess you wouldn't in a getaway situation. If the Trojans had looked like, if it had looked a gift horse in the mouth, it would have saved them a lot of trouble. Well, it was the first time it happened. What do you expect? Fool me once. 4 minutes is specific, 5 minutes is generic. It's true. Rule of fives, right? Like that one a couple of weeks ago, like 4 minutes. Someone says they're going to be 4 minutes late, they'll be on time. And then if someone says 5 minutes, they're going to be like super, super late. Skincare is only fun if you have good skin already. The way you walk is your body's accent. I like that one. The most hated ringtone is the one used for a daily alarm. There it is. Very good, very good. If a post in an unpopular opinion gets into hot, then there's no longer an unpopular opinion. I guess, yeah, it's true. It's considered weird to watch people have sex, but normal to watch porn. Yeah, change your views. Pizza crust is a palate cleanser for the next slice of pizza. There you go, eat your crust, kids. Without fail, Medusa, I'm not going to say this one. Homeless people technically have the largest homes. I mean, come on. Very insensitive, but a shower thought. The average human has less than one nose. Oh, that's true. I guess, because, yeah, probably. Oh, wow, that's weird. The brain could actually be as useless, a useless parasite that's simply brainwashing us into thinking it's important. Whoa, I like that one. Phones and laptops are constantly aware of exactly how long they have left to live. Oh, that's actually really sad, right? There's something kind of sad about that. If short people were to only date short people, all tall people, and only date tall people, we might see a split of human species into two other species. Pretty sure the world's most widely played percussion instrument is a car steering wheel. One day there will be retro Instagram filters that downgrade your images to 4K. Caterpillars have mastered beauty sleep. And one last, if everything else is predetermined, then we would only realize if it was predetermined. Whoa! Crazy stuff. I love a shower thought. They bring me great joy. And thanks for listening to me ramble on about it. So thank you for listening to the Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you all please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review for us that I can peruse in my off time. And rate the episode. That really helps us boost in the ratings. And also please follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. Thank you again, and have yourselves a great night.